Welcome everyone to this session on mountain livelihoods, rural micro enterprises, livestock-based livelihoods. Now, since morning, we have been talking about different kind of livelihood. The session is mainly focused on livestock-based livelihoods. And I also welcome my co-chair, Mr. K. Raghavendra Rao, who is a freelance consultant from Mysore, India. And he is a faculty with Bhumi College. And I'll share his profile. Also, I think you all must have got, the say the details of the presenters and all. So I'll also share it later. And in this session, we have, as you can see, we have 4 expert faculty member presentation. We have Sergio, we have Dr. Limingo Ding, we have Dr. Ruijun Long, and we have 2 other presenters. Professor Ruijun Long has another presentation along with Dr. Denfeng Long, and Dr. Devendra Gauchan will also join us from Nepal. And then after this, we have a 4 delegate presentation, Ms. Sumit from India. Yeah, and then Dr. Natalia from Ukraine, Dr. Mykola from Ukraine, and Dr. Valentina from Ukraine. So this is the structure of the program, and the expert faculty members will get 30 minutes each, and please stick to your time. And the other presenters, the delegates, will get 10 minutes to present. And now I will hand it over to my co-chair, Mr. K. Raghavendra Rao, to conduct the session. Over to you, Raghavendra ji.
Yeah, welcome. Can people see me? Yeah, okay, that's me. Welcome all of you. I mean, I see that there are several participants, almost 62 now. It keeps on fluctuating, but I think we are sticking around 60 to 70. So welcome all of you. And we are going to listen to a group of experts, and we're going to go almost all over the world. We're going to go to China. We're going to start with Spain, go to China, and then stay in China for a little bit. And then the delegates are from India and from Ukraine. So we're covering most of the globe. And I'm sure you'll hear some good things from people who've been doing some very good research in livelihoods and mountainous livelihoods. And this session focuses on livestock. So I'm sure you'll learn many interesting things. So without spending more time, I'd like to invite Dr. Sergio to come on and let us know what excellent work he's done in Spain.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm going to share my screen so you can see the presentation. All right. Okay, the title of my lecture is Grassland Livestock Interface, which is quite a broad topic, as you can guess. So I'm going to focus on a basic question, my presentation, which is grazing by livestock good or bad for grasslands? Of course, this is a too vague and broad question, but I think it's going to be useful for exploring the context. So I'm going to focus on a specific study case. We are going to summarize the findings of the report Extensive Grazing and Habitat Conservation, Analysis of the Effect of Extensive Grazing on the Conservation of Habitats of Community Interest in Spain. You have here the link to the full report in case you're interested in having more information. So what we have done, we have explored the impact of extensive livestock grazing in the conservation status of natural and semi-natural habitats in the European Union. Okay, we have based this study on official European Union data. So we didn't went to the field or didn't try ourselves. This is official European Union data, so it's really reliable. We take the case of Spain because Spain is one of the European Union countries where pastoral activity is more important, and also because more than half of all the types of habitats of the European Union are present in Spain. So Spain is really representative of the biodiversity, represent very well the biodiversity of the European Union. So a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about the source of the data. This is important to understand the rest of the outcome of the study and the results. So we have in the European Union a piece of law which is called the Habitats Directive that protects not only habitat but also all the rest of the animal species and plants. Apart from birds, birds have their own habitat, their own directive. So the Habitats Directive describes what they call habitats of community interest. This type of habitats are in Annex 1 with a really high degree of conservation status, because they are endangered, or because they have a very restricted area, or because they are outstanding examples from the ecological point of view. So these are the most important habitats we have in all the European Union, okay? And they are characterized in different types, like forest, grassland, and subtypes, and so on, up to being able to describe very specifically each of the habitats. We are going to see some examples later. So the Habitat Directive lists today 233 European types of habitats that are habitats of community interest, where I'm going to refer further on to them as HCI. And as I said, a little bit more than half are present in Spain. So according to one of the articles of this Habitat Directive, the European Union members, Spain and all the rest of the countries, have to report every 6 years, I think, on the conservation status and the trend of this habitat. So we know how well are doing these habitats and what is the trend. If they are this conservation status is improving or is getting worse, and so on. So this is very interesting. The conservation status assessment is made by national teams of experts that mostly are those researchers that are publishing and really know very well each of the habitats. Mostly are botanists and ecologists. You have here the link to see all the database, which is a huge database, as you can see, as you can get, because it goes all through the 27 or something countries of the European Union, also through all the habitats. There are 233, and also through all the biogeographical region, which is Atlantic, Mediterranean, and so on. So it's a huge database. So we have been done to make it easier. This is an example of the kind of types of habitat that are described in the Habitats Directive. This is one kind of very valuable upland grasslands, which are very valuable for grazing, and is also endangered. This is another one. They go with 4 numbers, like 6220. This is one. This is another one, and so on. So what we have done is to check all these habitats for Spain, and we have checking the description of the threats and pressures on this habitat. And we made a big database where we filter all the threats related to grazing, sorry. So we can know which habitats grazing is good or bad and at which extent. Okay, so filtering all this. By the way, we started analyzing only grasslands, but then we noticed that grazing activity is very important in many other habitats, like forests, wetlands, scrubs. So we are using all habitats for this study, all Spanish habitats for this study. So the first thing that this database show up, which is interesting already, is the big differentiation they made between intensive grazing and extensive grazing. So for those among you that are not so familiar with these two kind of systems, this farming system, intensive grazing, they are grasslands that are not allowed the time needed to recover from grazing naturally. So you need to put chemical, pesticides, and artificial fertilizer, to make possible the plants to grow again. This is a picture of what could be an intensive grazing system. And conversely, there are extensive grazing systems, which is this one, for example, which is in southern Spain. Extensive grazing systems feeds livestock, making use of the natural resources of the territory with a low use of external inputs. External inputs, you know, is fuel, artificial food, many other things. So the animals normally get it from the environment. So this is the first difference that the experts made when they analyzed grazing, the impact of grazing on the natural, on this protected habitat. Another big difference they made is related to threats and pressure is overgrazing and lack of grazing. So overgrazing occurs when grasslands are grazed in such a way, well, not only grasslands, but any habitat, in fact, that are grazed in such a way that plant community cannot recover from grazing. This causes erosion, soil loss, and impoverishment of the plant community. Both as a grassland, you lose also the pastures, but also as an ecosystem, and from the biodiversity point of view. But there is the opposite problem also that has been identified in many of the European Union habitats, which is the lack of grazing. When lack of grazing happens, there is new, more, let's say, aggressive or dominant species that take over all the ecosystem and can make disappear this habitat, and by botanical succession. So in this picture, you see how some bushes are growing over a grassland because of the lack of use. This normally is caused by diversity loss, and so many of our habitats, the habitat that we have in the European Union, which very high important from the point of view of biodiversity, are semi-natural habitats. This means that these habitats only exist because there is traditional activities that are related to the survival of this habitat. So this habitat that we are studying includes natural habitats and semi-natural habitats, habitats that are dependent from traditional activities, which are many of the grasslands. So what are the main conclusions of our report? The first thing, which is quite obvious for those of you that work on the topic, is that extensive livestock grazing and intensive livestock grazing have a very different impact, often opposite, on the conservation status of habitat. So it is urgent to clearly characterize and differentiate extensive and intensive livestock grazing features in order to recognize and better understand the different impact on habitat conservation. So it doesn't make much sense, coming back to the first question I made, doesn't make much sense just to talk about if grazing is positive or negative if we don't separate clearly before these two kind of farming systems or grazing systems. And this is very important when we talk about subsidies and incentives that are very important, for example, in Europe. So before we decide to support or to limit any grazing activity, we need to separate these two things. And this is very difficult. Well, not so difficult, but this has not been done in most of the administration and most of the government. They understand and talk about all these two very different opposite systems as the same thing. So this is one of the things of the problem that we have to fix. The second main conclusion is that 80% of Spanish terrestrial habitats of community interest, well, I didn't say it before, but we only analyze it for obvious reasons, the terrestrial habitats. There are also marine habitats. So, but we have taken all the terrestrial habitats. So 80% are in an unfavorable status. So they are in bad shape from the conservation point of view. So we have a very big problem. Not only in Spain, this is the same situation at the European Union level. Extensive livestock grazing is a major biodiversity conservation tool. So it's very much related with the shape, good shape or bad shape of many of these habitats. For example, measures proposed by the European Union for preserving 1/3 of all the Spanish habitats, terrestrial habitats, includes to adapt or reinstate mowing, grazing, and other equivalent agricultural activities. So they are linked together. The survival of our habitats, or 1/3 of our habitats, are related very closely with traditional activities, mostly with grazing. So the design of local grazing management plans is needed to adapt the management of extensive livestock grazing at local level, guaranteeing both a good conservation status of grazing habitats, as well as the sustainability of the grazing activity and the communities they live from. The third main conclusion of the study is that undergrazing by livestock or abandonment of pastoral activity is a major threat for the conservation of many types of Spanish habitats. 60% of all terrestrial habitats are endangered by the lack of grazing activity. Okay, so this includes all habitats, all terrestrial habitats. So if we take, for example, only the grasslands, this percentage is going to be much bigger. So the conclusion is that grazing is needed for conservation of Spanish habitat, for at least 1/3. Of course, some terrestrial habitats are so fragile that doesn't allow grazing, but 1/3 of them, 60% of them need grazing for survival, for improving their conservation status. Okay, so what does this mean? If we need now to take a bigger picture to understand why is the case that grazing is so important for European Union habitat. This will be the same, I guess, in every corner of the globe, but we have the data just for the European Union. So it is clear that our habitats have co-evolved along many times with extensive grazing from wild herbivores. This is a recreation of Granada, of the city I'm living now in southern Spain. This is the recreation of the landscape and the communities, the herbivorous communities that were living here not so long time ago from the ecological point of view, of course. So this was the context among many of the plants, many animals, and clearly habitats has evolved. So they need and they are adapted to grazing and movement, big movements of herbivores. Then, as you know, humans has followed herbivores, intersectional migrations to hunt them. Before, when we were hunter-gatherers, we just went up and down to the mountains in summer, to the high altitudes in summer, looking as herbivores were looking for the green grass, for the best pastures. We went with them looking for hunting them, and the same way back in winter to the lowlands. So we have been moving up and down in the same way, following these grazers, these wild grazers, in the same way that we are moving up and down with transhumance and with the movements of the cattle in summer and so on. Probably you are in your country familiar with this. So we knew all these roads, so to say, the drop roads and all these systems. And once we started to breed domestic herbivores ourselves, we were just doing the same. We were just following the same path and the same roads up and down. So pastoralists have recreated through extensive grazing and transhumance the routes and seasonal migrations and the ecological processes that wild ungulates today cannot sufficiently perform in most of the habitats because of habitat fragmentation, you know, fences, roads, everything. Can you imagine? That wild ungulates today, the habitat fragmentation, the impoverishment of the grazing species diversity. There are much less quantities of herbivores now, of the richness and the diversity of the species now than before. And in some areas, there is a low density of wild herbivores too. So to provide you an example of this, I have been researching on vultures in Spain. these raptors that feed on dead animals. And it's very weird that for example, the colonies from the Pyrenees fly more than 1,000 kilometers to feed on southern Spain and southwest Spain. Even if they have a lot of food in the same territory. So we don't know why, even when they have the chicks, the babies, which is they really need to get back to the nest almost every day, they fly more than 1,000 kilometers. And the interesting thing is they are following exactly mostly the same drove route that the transhuman is performed nowadays. So it's not that they need that food, but it's that they are adapted and they have some, probably, we don't know why, but some kind of culture of going along with livestock up and down to the mountains through huge distances in the same way that wild herbivores does in the past. They were there also, and they were doing the same. So they are for some reason keeping doing the same. So this is how our habitats were shaped, and this is why this is still very important extensive grazing for plant communities. So for giving you an example, a more concrete example of, I'm trying to get rid of the top, well, doesn't matter. For giving you some studies that are now analyzing this impact, this more concrete impact of extensive grazing in habitats. Sheep, for example, 1,000 sheep, which is the average size of a flock here in Spain, or 100 transhuman cows disperse more than 150 million seeds and about 100 tons of manure over more than 500 kilometers of valleys, rivers, slopes, mountains, plateaus, and so on, during the journeys of approximately 1 month, walking along the drove roads that cross all Spain, for example. So this means that they are having a huge ecological role in plant community. I'm just talking about dispersing seeds now, but we can talk also about fertilizing, we can talk also about preventing fires and so on. So when we talk about extensive grazing, we should think also about, and we should link this activity to adaptation to climate change, because many of these plant communities are in very strong need of moving up and down on the mountains, as you know, because probably their altitudes they have been evolving are not suitable anymore for them, for these plant communities to survive. So they will probably need to go up if the temperatures are increasing, for example. So the role of extensive grazing can be very important on that. Also, we can talk about soil protection. It's very clear the difference between intensive and extensive grazing in relation to soil protection. The pastures that are grazed in a suitable manner with a capacity that allows the regeneration of plants are much more able to store carbon and to store the soil. We also can talk about animal welfare, for example, comparing the industrial business of meat production with extensive grazing. We can talk about preserved biodiversity. Many species depend on the semi-natural steppes, like the great vesture, and also the many steppe species are depending on the pastoral activity to maintain this habitat. Also, we can talk about pollution, about how if you make an intensive farming, all the manure of the animals is just contaminating the ground. And conversely, in the extensive grazing, the manure is just fertilizing the natural habitat. We can talk about circular economy. We can talk about CO2 footprint, which is very different when you are doing extensive grazing, because there are very little income of fossil fuels, which is very different from intensive grazing, where you need a lot of electricity, artificial food, light, heat, whatever, or ventilation, and so on. We can talk also about forest fires. In Spain, there are some initiatives that are using extensive livestock for preventing forest fires. That is a huge problem in Mediterranean Europe. Very successful programs, but of course, it's always bigger business to buy planes and huge machinery. There's a huge industry interest there, much more than promoting extensive grazing. So the pressure on the governments, as you can imagine, it's much smaller from the grazing sector. We can talk about sustainability. We can talk about food sovereignty, about the quality of the food and the health, how healthy the food is, the food that we are talking, hormones and so on, antibiotics, and there is a lot of collateral interesting topics related with the grazing and extensive grazing. So just for finishing, the overall conclusion from our report, as we understand it, is that the survival of many of our most valuable habitats and species is directly linked to the survival of well-managed extensive grazing. And the survival of those communities and governance institutions that make them possible. What this means is that extensive grazing doesn't happen just in a vacuum, cannot be solved by just technical support. You need communities with a culture and the knowledge, local and traditional knowledge to perform that activity. And also you need not only the community, but the governance institutions that are ruling these communities. And there is a big problem. We don't have much time to talk about it, but it's a huge problem on the clash between this capitalist economic system when they met the governance institution of extensive grazing that mostly are common systems, common collective governance systems, which, as you can guess, doesn't fit so well in the capitalist view of the world. So this is the fight of our time, and this is how we expect to be contributing a little bit with this study. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thanks very much, Sergio, for a lovely talk. And sort of for illustrating all these important aspects of what extensive grazing does. I was quite taken by the fact that agricultural landscapes need grazing to survive. That was a very interesting thing. And I'm sure you've done a lot of work to support that, which is excellent. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. And in case, because we're still within the time, in case there are people who need to ask any questions, got any doubts, perhaps you could chat with Sergio in the chat box, perhaps. Thank you very much.
Thank you.